other kids are calling me a carrot.
Those kids are learning it from somewhere. Those kids that are still at that school doing that, you know, they don't just do that.
I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't take it. It came to the point that last year I stayed out of school purposely to try to stay away from them.
But here what we get is nothing's wrong. We didn't do anything. Everything's fine. Well, it's not fine because my child's not going to graduate this high school. He's not going to get to go to the prom.
Tyler, I'm not letting you go, son. You're still here with me. But if change is gonna come, I have to let go.
From WRCB Channel 3, the Chattanooga Times Free Press, and WTCI, this is The Bully Battle, a town hall meeting.
Good evening, I'm Cindy Sexton.
And I'm David Carroll. We'd like to thank you for joining us for The Bully Battle, a special town hall meeting on bullying. And during the next hour, we want to discuss some real solutions to the problem affecting so many children at school and online too.
And it's a topic that has dominated headlines both locally and nationally. And we want to make our community a better place to live.
So during the next hour, we'll be talking about 5 categories for main discussion. What is bullying? The definition. What is cyberbullying? Who's at risk for bullying? How can we prevent it? And perhaps most important, how do we respond to bullying? And we'll be taking questions from our audience too. Cindy, as a matter of fact, you'll be handling that part of the program for us, and we'll let you go ahead and go down to the audience right now. In the meantime, I'd like to let you know that we have some very special guests on our panel this evening who'll be talking and leading the discussion. From the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office, we have Lieutenant Shaun Shepard. Shaun supervises the School Resource Officers Unit for the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. And Shaun, we want to thank you for coming. Also with us this evening, we have Karen Glenn. Karen is the director of S.T.A.R.S, Students Taking a Right Stand for Hamilton County Schools, and they're responsible for many of the anti-bullying programs that are in place. Oran Dixson is with us this evening. Oran is the student body president at East Ridge High School. He's also a member of the Superintendent's Student Advisory Council, and he's about to graduate from East Ridge High, and we're very happy to have him with us this evening. Rodger Dinwiddie comes to us from Nashville. He's the president of the International Bullying Prevention Association, and he's also been very active in the anti-bullying movement statewide and nationally. David and Tina Long are here from Chatsworth, Georgia. They're featured in the film Bully that's currently in theaters. Their son Tyler was a victim of bullying who committed suicide in 2009, and they are certainly very much visible on the national platform right now. So those are the folks who are on the panel this evening, and right now we'd like to go to Cindy, who has some special guests in our audience.
David, we mentioned earlier the partnership that Channel 3 has in this project, and we are so delighted to introduce to you Kate Harrison. She is with the Chattanooga Times Free Press, and Paul Grove, who is President, CEO of WTCI. And you have so graciously allowed us to come here to your studios, and all of your crew has worked with our crew, and we just feel like this is a wonderful project. Paul, welcome.
Thank you very much. We also are 100% wanting to be a partner in this very important issue. WRCB and the Chattanooga Times Free Press, this is a wonderful way for us to all work together, and we know how important this issue is to tackle and provide some solutions throughout our region, and it's such an important topic that's obviously been quite huge throughout the nation.
And of course, our newspaper as well, an advocate in our community for making it a better community. And Kate, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. Happy to be here, and we're committed to continuing to cover this issue.
And we'll be checking in with you a little bit later on. I understand you have a question for our panel.
Yes,
right.
I do.
Thank you both, Kate and Paul.
Cindy, thank you. In an effort to make this issue and this night more interactive with you at home, we've been soliciting questions from Twitter and Facebook all across the last month from all of you. And I'll be my pleasure here to insert some of those questions and ask them of the panel. Some very interesting questions and some statements too that we'll toss their way. So David, let's get underway.
Thank you, Greg. And in order to really talk about solutions as far as bullying is concerned, maybe it's best to define it. You know, what's bullying? What's just horseplay and fooling around? That's a part of a national debate right now, the true definition of bullying. So for more on that, let's go to Greg.
You know, of course, kids disagree and pick on each other to some degree.
But at what point is this behavior no longer innocuous? Psychologist Dr. Susan Hickman says it's when
the harm is intentional. The person is intending to harm, whether that's physically, you know, or psychologically.
The behavior is usually repeated.
And then the victim does perceive it as being threatening. They feel that their safety is threatened. And another piece of it is there is usually a power differential. You know, that because like the victim, for example, may be weaker physically or already socially marginalized or shy.
Even with boys and girls, the Mars-Venus analogy holds true.
Males are more likely to do the shoving, to do the physically aggressive things.
Females tend to use psychological warfare.
So it's very indirect. So the gossiping, the malicious lies and rumors, and they'll invoke the peer group to actually do harm. You know, like let's all not like that person.
One more shocking statistic.
Almost a third of child suicides can be attributed to peer victimization.
Wow.
Well, that we need to be paying attention.
You know, everybody on this panel has been around for a few years except Oran. He's our junior member up here. But I'm going to start with Rodger Dinwiddie from the International Bullying Prevention Association. Is bullying really more prevalent than it used to be, or are we just hearing about it more in this era of 24-hour news?
Well, I think that we live in a post-Columbine world, and when Columbine occurred, everything changed when it came to the issue of bullying. You know, when you go back almost 10, 12 years, there was absolutely nothing in the public discourse at all about the issue of bullying. So it's now a heightened issue across this country, not only here, but across the world. And it seems to be that one of the things that's made it more prevalent is at least the fact that cyberbullying has been involved in the makeup of the issue as well. So we've got technology, which is an all-time 24/7 issue that's really heightened the sense of how prevalent bullying really is. But in truth, bullying's been around since people have been breathing air.
For sure, and will continue to be. Shaun Shepard, Lieutenant with the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department. We touched on cyberbullying and some of the new types of bullying that you all have to deal with these days. You've been an officer for a long time. Are you seeing more of this behavior, or again, is it just being reported more?
Certainly you have a lot more of the cyberbullying, you know, and the fear there is the fact that you can't escape it like you used to as far as when you got home from school, because every kid wants to be afforded that opportunity to be online and have those luxuries and have those opportunities to explore that. And then they get on these social networks and then it pops up. And so it's almost around the clock, or it's on their cell phone because they get updates. So for us, yeah, we're getting a lot more, at least reporting of it, mainly because of what happens at home, and it's being relayed to the parents more often, I think, now too, because we're getting a lot of parents coming to the officers and asking for help or some kind of guidance.
All right, we have a question from Kate Harrison with the Times Free Press. Cindy?
We do, David, and Kate wanted to address it specifically to Rodger and Karen. Kate?
It's kind of a two-part question. What are some of the recurring or most challenging obstacles you face as you try to change how schools address bullying? And then along with that, what are some of the best procedures you've seen schools adopt to confront and to root out bullying?
Obstacles would be, number one, denial on the part of a lot of school folks about the seriousness of the issue. An obstacle also would be time for training and for money, for resources to actually address the issue. But time being one of the issues, with all the heightened sense of focus on school reform, academic outcomes and whatnot, there's really an absence of time sometimes to actually do training. That's one of the largest obstacles to schools being able to address the issue.
And let's hear from Karen Glenn now, with students taking a right stand. And you're in the schools every day, you see what's going on. How would you respond?
To piggyback what Rodger said, time is certainly a huge obstacle as far as this is concerned. But one of the things, I think the other part of your question was, what are the best opportunities or the best procedures? And what we're using is an OVS Bullying Prevention Initiative, which starts with a trainer of teachers, and those trained teachers in turn train the entire staff, because there's so many blurred definitions of what bullying is, and many of the adults have a different opinion of what it is.
Oran, I want to get your take on this too. We talk about the needs and the lack of resources. If a lot of money landed into your lap, and we said we're going to let you put that into the schools to help stamp out bullying. And you had a choice between, say, more security cameras, more police officers, or more guidance counselors. What do you think would do the most good?
Honestly, I think guidance counselors would be the most effective.
More than police?
Yes.
Why?
Honestly, because bullying completely starts with a student and their past, I believe. And it all comes from that lack of insecurity. And to get inside the student's mind and to actually locate that lack of insecurity is what needs to be done, and that's what guidance counselors do on a daily basis, or what they're supposed to do. And the more the better.
David and Tina Long, we're going to be talking more about their story later, but I want to get you guys involved in this part of the conversation because you've lived through this, you've traveled across the country. How would you respond to that?
Let me just say this. I've talked to a lot of parents, and through personal experience, I understand the issue about time and money, but when you have kids that go to school and you have those days at the beginning and at the end of the school years where there's not a lot going on in the schools other than just gearing up or gearing down, those are key opportunity times that we could take advantage of.
Well, I'd like to introduce you both a little more, and we'll continue the conversation because 2.5 years ago, the Long family of Chatsworth, Georgia was shaken by a terrible tragedy in their lives, the suicide of 17-year-old Tyler Long. He had been bullied in school for several years, and ever since that day, the Longs have been vocal in the anti-bullying movement. And their efforts are depicted in the documentary Bully, which has put them on the national stage.
However,
David and Tina Long didn't want to be celebrities. It was never their intention to be interviewed on national television, attend movie premieres, or appear on White House panels.
We're not anything special. We haven't done anything special. We're just doing what I think all parents should do.
But in the wake of their son Tyler's suicide and a perceived indifference by some educators on the effects of bullying, the Longs have become a leading voice in the anti-bullying crusade.
But yes, I'm very proud of it because it allows us to give us something forever in memory of Tyler. And I think that's always will be there.
The success of Bully, which features the Longs and other families, has given David and Tina a chance to meet people from all walks of life. They've comforted families and given support to kids who are going through difficult times in school.
I would hate to think 5-10 years from now that we're sitting here talking about the same issues in our schools. Because if we are, then we failed our kids and we failed our grandkids.
And certainly we don't want to have this discussion 5 or 10 years from now. It would be nice if we were able to say it's gone away, but that's going to be hard. Now, David and Tina have been to the White House. They've been to film premieres all across the country. And one thing I know is very close to your heart are children with disabilities. Tyler himself suffered with Asperger's syndrome, a form of autism. And you all have told me in the past, Tina, that it seems like many of the children who are bullied these days are considered disabled.
Actually, 60% is the number right now that we're getting. And one of the things that we have done that we're most proud of, I think, is we've teamed up with the National Center for Learning Disabilities. And they actually have a toolkit that goes along with the movie for kids with disabilities that have been bullied, that are getting bullied. And parents can go online and find that at thebullyproject.com. And the film has also came out with a lot of resources for parents to use. So that issue is very close to our heart because of Tyler's Asperger's.
Let me say one thing on that, David, was the NCLD teamed up or partnered with Autism Speaks, PACER, and also Abilities Path, which all deals with the same type of children with disabilities. So they thought they're combining each other's efforts and working together as one would create a more impact in our society dealing with kids with disabilities.
This kind of goes right along with what you're talking about. How much longer will we have to talk about this subject before we solve the problem? The question is, how long has it been going on? This one from Tasha Bowers from our Facebook page. She writes, when I was in school, I was tortured. Backpacks thrown at me, was called everything but my name. I even had my hair cut in class. Her question is, why did we wait so long and let the bullying get out of hand? Let me throw that up to Rodger and see, was it Columbine, the flare that went off to let us know that it was more than kids just being kids?
It certainly had a lot to do with that, because the issue of school shootings really brought to light the issue, sort of the sub-issue of bullying, because 75% of those young people who pulled the trigger in the school shootings had in fact been long-term harassed and bullied and saw no end to the issue and began to take those things into their own hands, seeking a way to retaliate and get back at those who had been torturous to them. So it really, that was the kind of the linchpin, if you will, that really brought the issue out, because again, there were no articles published in the United States prior to Columbine about bullying.
All right, Cindy, I believe we have someone in the audience who has a comment or a question.
David, we do. A parent, mother of 5 children, Signal Mountain, Middle and High, and Nolan Elementary. And Janet, you have a question.
Yes, this is for the Long family. Were there any signs? Because that's very concerning to those of us who are dealing with teens in those tedious times.
We knew for years that he was getting bullied and fought with the school for years. You get to a point where you have nowhere else to go. And I think Tyler felt that way too.
I think one of the things that has really been discussed is a safe place. We thought we had a place where Tyler could come after school. We gave him an environment at home, and we thought everything would be taken care of. If he had issues at school, we were able, or we thought we dealt with them correctly. But when he came home, we wanted to provide him with a safe place. And I think the last discussion that we had had with anybody, that was really key important to a lot of people. We need to have safe places for these kids to be able to go to and trust that something's going to be done.
However, you know, we've been told it doesn't matter what we as parents did for him. What matters a little bit more at that age is what their peers think about him.
Karen Glenn's with Hamilton County Schools, and you know, those of us in the news business hear this a lot. Probably in the top 2 or 3 complaints we'll hear from parents is, I went to the school, they're not doing anything about it. Now I know, and in fact we have many principals and superintendents in the audience, I know most of them are trying to do something about it, but what do you do when you hear that from a parent? What's their next step?
Well, I think as a parent, and I'm a parent too, I think that we just have to be persistent. We have to continue to keep going, and you know, we know our kids and we know the situations, and I think it's really important for us to be able to develop a rapport with our teachers and you know, have a dialogue, a regular dialogue, so that we can share with them the types of things that we're seeing and hope that maybe it can be resolved without it blowing up in their face. I know that there was a question that was asked about why is it a situation, why it's so heightened now. I think that snitching has been really big, and I think that there have been a lot of situations where there's been silence about it. So we need to empower our students to be vocal about it and to talk about it and to keep talking about it, because it's the same thing as we talk about abuse. You keep talking until someone is responding to this behavior, because it is a form of abuse. We don't want any child to be subjected to that.
All right, we're going to shift gears just for a moment now and talk about social media, because that has really become a dominant topic in the past few years. It seems as though bullying really becomes pervasive in social media. It gives kids another way to do it. Many kids not only endure the bullying at school, but oftentimes it continues when they get home, when they check Facebook or go on their cell phone. The bullies are using these new platforms, and Donna L. has more on that story.
This local mom is too afraid to go on camera for fear of her daughter's safety. She says that logging onto Facebook has become a painful experience for her daughter.
They were threatening her to beat her up.
Because a recent study by the Hamilton County Health Department shows 1 in 4 students is a victim of bullying. 15% of that occurs online. Half of the victims show signs of depression, and more than 30% think about taking their own life. The director of S.T.A.R.S, Karen Glenn, says parents have to step up.
They allow their kids to have a Facebook page at 13. They're opening the door for inappropriate things.
Glenn says parents should monitor their children's social media activity often. And she also says cyberbullying typically begins at home.
I went to the principal, went to the superintendent's office.
Jerry Weary says comments on social media might not be a crime, but repetitive cyberbullying could be considered stalking or harassment.
Tennessee does not have a cyberbullying law.
This mom says parents have to protect their children by staying involved.
She still doesn't want to go back to school at all.
It would seem like the answer is really easy. You know, parents just supervise what your kids do on their computer and their phone. It's not that easy, is it?
No, I'm afraid it's not, because there's oftentimes our children often don't convey to us the number of places they really go online. And you know, there's an interesting survey about this, that 93% of parents say that they've done a really good job communicating with their kids about the internet. But only about 45% of their kids actually say they have any idea at all from their parents about the internet. So there's a big chasm on this. I think the other part to it too is parents have oftentimes an overreactive mode when it comes to cyberbullying and the issues associated with the internet, and too frequently pull privilege from kids, which is the kids' greatest fear in the world, is losing privilege on the internet, and overreacting to a report about it often just keeps kids from telling us about it. So I think it's really important to make sure that parents, and I love this from one of the national resources, there should be at least one parent in the home who has they're like the go-to person for the internet knowledge, because our kids are so far beyond anything that personally I or most of my colleagues or friends will ever keep up with. We're never going to catch up. We just got to get in the game.
Oran, from your perspective as a student, just graduating, what have you seen along this line?
As a senior in high school, I've been there for 4 years, and you know, there are students that you can kind of tell that are being bullied a lot. Cyberbullying, school bullying, it all happens, it's all the same. And honestly, social media has grown in the past couple of years. You know, I use Twitter, I use Facebook, and on there you can see many different situations where you can see there's an argument just by timelines, just by Facebook statuses. You can see there's an argument going on just there, and honestly, it's kind of childish, and it deserves to be taken to another level. You know, as parents, you know, parents, they put supervision on their a child's Facebook at a certain level of age. You know, when I was a child, I was 13 years old. My dad, my mom, they took my Facebook, and you know, they would check it. You know, my mom, she's my Facebook friend now. She looks on there every now and then. And I honestly think that more supervision would honestly make it a little bit better for kids.
They tell bystanders to get involved when kids are doing something out in the open. Can you be an online bystander too? Are you supposed to take action when you see something like that?
Of course. You know, there are many opportunities where students will comment on a Facebook status that's an argument, and they will kind of tell them that, you know, chill back, you know, kind of take it back a little bit because it's getting too far out of hand. And you know, there's always an opportunity where you can always have a say-so in a situation.
So you've told somebody to chill back?
Yes.
Oran, you're my hero. Cindy has a question now from the audience.
I think he's everybody's hero tonight, David. Thank you. Yes, Mary Caliandro is here with me, the parent of 3 middle schoolers. I gave her a pat on the back for that first. But Mary, you want people to go back to basic. You want to see changes in curriculum. Tell everybody what your comment is.
We're so focused on the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s. We're not focusing on what can help children as adults function as fully functional and healthy adults. We need to focus on relationships, which includes bullying. Bullying is not a healthy relationship. And how do we solve the problem? How do we solve the problem of divorce? I mean, you can't solve it with just your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. Do you as a panel see hope for our educational system shifting to include those vital life skills?
That's one key component in the bullying initiative that we're doing in Hamilton County, where students have an opportunity to focus on those appropriate socialization skills. I think that those skills are very much what gets hindered in the whole cyber internet. You know, we're not interacting with each other like we should. And so you can imagine 20, 30 years ago, you'd have one ball, throw it outside, and 20 kids, and you'd all come together and develop some negotiation skills in that process. Well, in this day and age, everybody's at home in their television, in their room with their iPod, and that socialization just does not happen.
And we're also monitoring our cyber corner this evening, exactly what we're talking about. That's how many people communicate. And Greg Glover has a question from that area.
David, we go back to our Facebook page where we've been soliciting questions for a month now. We've picked some of the best to present tonight. We've talked about the child being bullied. We've talked about the school administration. We've talked about the parents. Let's talk about the kid doing the bullying now. Richard Eglin does not have a question, but he has an interesting statement. It says, "One thing I would do is have any student or students found guilty to make a public apology and explain their reasoning for doing it. Lieutenant, I'll throw this one up to you. I know there are laws on the books. There is appropriate punishment if rules are violated. Are there things we can do as a deterrent, whether through your capacity, through a teacher's capacity, or a parent's capacity, to someone who is a bully? Would the threat of public shame be a deterrent, for example?
Well, Greg, I think that one of the things that we face in Tennessee and a lot of states is there's just not a lot of legislation about bullying yet. I know that I've heard a lot of talk about that as far as bills being introduced to talk about bullying and defining it legally and how you deal with it. Unfortunately for us in law enforcement, we have to wait till something happens until we can react to it, and that's too late. I agree with Mrs. Long there that we got to do more on the front end. Some of the officers that I have working for me have been very innovative in some of their techniques, and they, in lieu of prosecution, they've actually incorporated some other punishments like research papers and cleanup details and things like that. That they have to sign a contract with their parents, and they actually come in and perform that. And so hopefully, especially the compositions that they write, we want them to research it and find out some things about it so they can kind of get a better understanding, and education is the key to all this. For the kids, for the parents, for the schools, for the community, education is going to be the key to all this as far as if we're really going to do anything about bullying in general.
We're getting some great questions and comments from the audience this evening as well. Let's go back to Cindy.
David, thanks. We have Lynn Church with us, a parent of two, a 4th grader and a 6th grader, Nolan Elementary, Signal Mountain Middle. Lynn, tell us your comment.
It really was to go on the last one we had over here. I recently met with our assistant principal and my 4th grade son's teacher, and I asked just that point. We work so hard to get them ready for middle school. They're really good at time management. They have agenda mates. We're transferring classes, getting them ready. But have we done any type of leadership training with them?
We certainly hope so, and that is definitely the goal. Each of the schools have the latitude to integrate those important skills, what's necessary at that school level, and they make that decision by pulling in the activities and the role plays, and some of them include things like what should you do or what would you do, kind of patterned after the television show. And so yes, that is definitely a need for those leadership, to cultivate those leaderships, because what we want to happen is we want to shift that norm. We want that behavior to not be accepted in the school, so that the norm is shifted. And that includes not just the student that has been victimized, but it also includes the bystanders, so that they don't applaud the behavior, that they may not have the skills to say, don't do that, that's not nice. But sometimes even the laughter can fuel it. And we know that laughter is a defense. We laugh sometimes when we're uncomfortable, and what we want to do is we want to teach the students how to respond appropriately, so that this antisocial behavior is not fueled.
David and Tina, you guys have done more traveling than the rest of us put together this past month or so, and you have heard from people, you visited school districts. We've discussed situations where a school district has failed a family. Are you seeing anything out there like they're talking about, people or school districts coming up with something that works, something that's effective?
I think one of the things, or encouraging things that I heard when I was in LA was, and we heard it from not just one, but a lot of people, that peer mentoring has a big role play in a lot of schools that has positive results out of anti-bullying programs, where you take your senior body group and you pair them up with the freshmen and the older kids with the younger kids. And I think that's something that's not costs no money. It just takes a little bit of time.
Some schools have a bully box where kids can anonymously put names in there, and that kind of helps out a little bit. The chancellor of the DC schools vowed to show the movie Bully to every single child in that school system as a way to create conversation to make change.
Well, it'll be on DVD before too many months go by, and I would encourage our school districts around here to consider that same idea. We've already discussed how this age of technology can increase the amount of bullying that kids are subjected to, but is there a type of person, a type of young person who's more likely to be bullied than another? Is there a type of person who's more likely to bully? Here's Callie Starnes.
School counselor Casey Jacobs says it's hard to say if bullying cases are on the rise.
Is it happening more often, or maybe were people dealing with it differently? I'm not sure.
She says technology has changed the way bullies reach their victims.
Texting, Facebook, things like that. So that has definitely changed the game.
The American Psychological Association says bullies are usually not the best students, and they usually pick on kids without social problem-solving skills. Jacobs says those stereotypes don't hold up.
Children and adults alike, anybody can be bullied. I don't think there's really a type of child that is subject to bullying.
She says it starts with parents who can spot the signs.
Withdrawal, depression, not completing their schoolwork as they typically would.
Jacobs says lowering the risk of bullying means increasing awareness and opening the lines of communication.
I have a question for Lieutenant Shaun Shepard. He leads the School Resource Officer Program for Hamilton County Schools. Another one of the top calls that we get in the news department, and I'm sure other people have heard. My son was bullied. He was just defending himself, and he's the one who got into trouble. He's the one who got suspended. As a police officer, why does that happen, and what's the meaning of that?
I think it's the action, just like in the Columbine incident. People are encouraged to stand up for themselves, but it's the methodology that you have to deal with, and that goes back to educating them again. When a kid is pushed to the limit where they don't have it's a fight or flight technique as far as a response, rather, and it's a human response. But when they choose poorly, or they choose something that's going to place them in a negative situation, and just to coin the expression that two wrongs never make it right, that's the unfortunate thing, is they end up either going too far or in a response, or they get pushed to that point, and what they choose, just like in the movie, the little girl who chose to bring a gun on the school bus in Mississippi. Certainly she was a victim and had been going on for at least a year there, but she elevated that level where sometimes you don't even have a choice. There's some things that officers and law enforcement don't have a choice. The law says you shall versus you may, and that's our response.
All right, let's hear from our audience. Cindy?
Right, David, thank you. Beaumont Covert is the parent of a child in a private school, St. Nicholas, and you have a comment or question for our panel?
I do. More to the elementary school age children. When they are faced with bullying, they may not have the skill set to deal with these kinds of situations. How would you advise that we help them?
Well, it's interesting that we haven't really talked very much about elementary age students, and the highest percentage of young people in the country who are bullied are in the 4th and 5th grade statistically. So those numbers are huge, from the largest database in the world, the Alveus database. The critical part for young children is if we don't have clear, and I'm going to go back to something Tina said just a minute ago, if we don't have clear rules about what we are expected to do as adults to protect those babies from the issue of bullying, then shame on us. And the first rule is all kids should be equipped with the knowledge that it's important to tell a teacher or an adult at home and at school, both places, that they're being bullied. And that is really hard to get kids to do. The second part is if they do report to an adult, that the adult doesn't minimize the issue when they report, and they take it seriously, because there's nothing worse than getting a kid brave enough to, and by the way, that's not just true for an elementary kid, that's true for a high school kid, and frankly, it's true for us as adults if we're being bullied, to tell somebody about it. It's hard to do, so I encourage us to make sure we are receptive when those young people tell us that they are being bullied.
I want to get David and Tina involved back in this. We think of you all as high school parents because of Tyler and now his 17-year-old siblings, but you raised them up through elementary. You've been there and seen this. What did you want to say?
Well, what I didn't hear that I was kind of hoping I would hear is we've got to follow up with these kids. After you talk to them, after they report it to you, they have to know two things. Number one, I'm going to be safe, that I'm going to be protected, and number two, that somebody is going to come back and make sure that I'm safe and protected. And that's one thing that a lot of schools, I think, neglect to do. They don't follow up with these kids. So they go and tell, and then they're left out in the cold. And we've got to be there for these kids. They have to know they're going to be protected if they tell. And that's something else. The bystanders can be brought in and say, hey kids, we've got an issue here. Help so-and-so. There's so much more we can do that doesn't cost anything, that can help our kids.
All right, Cindy, let's go back to you, please.
All right, David, we have a question from a therapist who acknowledges what a complex issue bullying is, and she's talking about how do we deal with the bullies themselves. And I think it follows what the Longs were saying as well, when nobody is even feeling remorse or willing to stand forward. So Lynn Forrest, parent of 7 and a grandparent, but also a therapist. Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I heard we need to make the bullies stop bullying, and I agree. I think we all agree that it needs to stop. Here's what I know, and that is that shame imprints the behavior. So when we shame a bully for bullying, they just go deeper underground with it. That's what I've seen, and so it's like, so what do you do to make the bully stop?
We can't control what goes on in a bully's house. I wish we could, but we can't. But we can control that environment that our kids live in a school. And I firmly believe that if we set clear guidelines and stick to those, the bullies will stop, or else they won't be in our school. To me, it's that simple. I'm not exactly sure why we're having such a hard time with it.
Well, that does sound simple. Why isn't it that simple? What's keeping it from being that simple? Is it the parents? I mean, do we have parents in denial who say there's no way that he would have done that and leave him alone and don't accuse him of that?
I think that definitely denial is a part of it, but I think that firm consequences and consistent consequences and persistent consequences is really what it's going to take. You know, I applaud the Longs for bringing this to the forefront and making us talk about it more and more. And it's obvious that we're doing a lot, but we need to do so much more. And I think that as we look at what our policies are and what our procedures are, we're going to only strengthen those, because we don't want anyone else to have to be subjected to what this family has gone through. And so there's work for all of us to do to make sure that that doesn't happen.
To reintroduce Oran Dixson, senior at East Ridge High School, Rodger said something a few minutes ago that shocked me. He said that the biggest numbers of bullying victims today are 4th and 5th grade. I would have said middle school. I don't know about everybody else. That shocked me. And you're not that far removed from 4th, 5th, 6th grade just a few years ago. Is that true? And we think of elementary bullying as kind of harmless. What's the reality?
That's the biggest part of bullying. I honestly think that that's true, that the 4th and 5th grade is the biggest part of bullying. It all starts as a child and it all grows. Do you remember any 4th or 5th graders who were already sort of the boss at home and they come to school and they think they should be boss there too? Yes. I've had class with some of them. Most of them, they would come and say, oh, I boss my parents around. You know, honestly, it's about the parental authority at home. That my mom, she is so hard on me. Like, I know that may seem funny, but she is hard on me, and it impacts me at school and everywhere I go outside of school. You know, it all depends on how you were raised and how your parents treat you at home and how they discipline you.
Rodger, it sounds like we need to do parenting classes maybe as much as we need to teach kids.
Well, there's a lot of that, absolutely. And most parents are struggling with, I mean, as obvious in the room tonight, to know what to do about this insidious issue. I want to circle back to the question real quickly about the shame issue, because I think it's a very important question. And I couldn't agree more. The critical issue for dealing with the consequences of bullying should be restorative, not shameful, and really looking for restorative acts that occur. And that has nothing to do with using like forms of mediation or conflict resolution, because bullying is a form of abuse. It's not a form of conflict. But to use some form of restorative justice, which the legal system is heavily involved with, is a great strategy to use in schools that can actually pull together the folks who are impacted by this issue and let those kids speak into the situation themselves. And that's not the same thing as like mediation and conflict resolution, which is shown to be not only doesn't work, can even be detrimental to helping address bullying situations.
All right. We have another question from our audience. Let's go back to Cindy Sexton.
Yeah, how would you deal with the parents of a bully? I know traditionally both parents would meet with the parent of the bully and you meet with the counselor and you want to discuss how to solve the problem, but oftentimes the bully's parents are worse than the bully.
Shaun, do you knock on the door? Do you call them? What do you do? How do you approach the parents of a bully?
Interesting enough, we one of the SROs today called with some issues of, hey, what do I do with this? And one of the recommendations was that, hey, let's get those parents together and let's get them in there and sit down and try to have some conversation and dialogue with them. It's a lot easier on a telephone to deny or to or have a position, just like it is on cyberbullying. It's a lot easier to bully on the internet than it is face to face. Let's get them in there. You don't know what the response is going to be. You don't know what the outcome is going to be, but you got to make the attempt.
Oran has not discussed this, but he was bullied in middle school. And I recognized the signs in him because he's a straight A student. And he started coming home, his grades started dropping. And I was asking him and trying not to overreact to the situation, but he finally told me, well, you know, this is going on in school. And like DeLong said, what do you do when the teachers ignore you? Well, they ignored me. The teacher ignored me. And I said to my son, I said, you know, and I told the teacher, I said, everybody has a boiling point. What are you going to do when he explodes? Because that may happen as well. So I don't want to see, I've been up here numerous times. Well, I had to go through the chain of command. What I had to do was go through the principal. Then I went through the principal. He stood by the teacher. I went through the principal. Then I had to go to the school board. And as we went to that school board, you said something that really touched me. You said strength is in numbers. I showed that my son had support from that community, from his mentors, from his grandparents, from his dad. We were all in that room as a team to let them know I was not joking, I was not playing, this has to cease. My son comes to school to learn, and he should be in a place to where he can learn and be safe and feel comfortable and not be bullied. And so there are strength in numbers. That was a resolution that I came to years ago, and he became very confident behind that. So it turned that situation around.
Why will they listen to 10 people when they didn't listen to one?
I don't know, and it's unfortunate that that had to happen, but I applaud you for continuing to pursue it to get the action that you needed. I think that, you know, I don't know. I don't have an answer why it would take 10 people. It should not be that way. And I'm hoping that we're doing better about that. You know, that was when he was in middle school, and I would hope that we're making progress in that, but it should not be.
All right, let's go back to the audience, and Cindy, along with Kate Harrison from the Times Free Press.
Yes, Kate has another question for the panel.
Yeah, this is for Oran, and I just wanted to ask you, what are the most common examples of bullying that you see at your school or among your peers? What are the, I guess, the most typical aspects of bullying that you see, or characteristics?
When you go to a high school, you see a lot of differentiality, and they've tried to sort of commonize the people in our school by setting up a dress code. And dress codes work to an extent. You know, you can have a polo shirt and a pair of khaki pants, but if you look at two different people, you can kind of tell that one may have been a little worn more, you know, they don't look the same. And when you try to get a lot of people that look the same, and there's that one person that tries to look the same, but inevitably it's different looking. You know, their clothes aren't as new or not the same brand. People tend to pick on them. And another example is, you know, we have a lot of homosexuals at our school that, you know, it's not really a comfortable topic at our school that people really cope with, and they tend to be the target of bullying. You know, there's a lot of differences. There's a lot of people at our school that look the same, they act the same, and when there are a lot of people who are different, and the different people inevitably get attacked.
Shaun, when you and your officers are walking the halls of a school and you hear, you know, slurs, whether they be racial, sexual, whatever, you can't arrest them, I suppose, but what do you do? What is your reaction?
Well, the officers do, we do the triad approach to SRO here in Hamilton County, where we actually teach, counsel, and law enforcement, all three. And I realize it looks different from campus to campus because of the diversity of our community, but one of the main things is that they actually build that relationship with kids, and they do call them out. You know, they spend a lot of times, I pulled the stats just for this school year alone, it's a little over 4,800 times that they've actually sat down with a student and had an advisory session of some sort of topic, whether it's something at school, relationship issues, something at home, or whatever it might be. And I noticed in some of the notes that a lot of it is bullying issues or problems or drama, as they call it. And I think that that's the fact that they just call attention to it. You know, and I kind of go back to this, what Oran was saying about someone standing up and saying something about it. Bullies tend to play to an audience. And if the audience doesn't find it funny, if the audience doesn't find the encouragement or the fuel that fire, and they lose all that, they lose the wind in their sail, they may tend to go back and all of a sudden they're the outcast. And they don't like that feeling. And so, you know, I think that the bystanders need to speak up and say something. Even if they don't report it to an adult, do it among yourselves as far as peers are concerned. That would go a long way when it comes to bullying and advocating it.
All right, thank you, Lieutenant Shaun Shepard, who supervises the school resource officers. Our Greg Glover is in the cyber corner this evening monitoring some online comments. Greg?
David, we go to Twitter for the next comment here, and this kind of speaks to what Tina mentioned just a moment ago, speaking about trying to change the climate in the school system. How about society at large? Rodger, I'll throw this one to you, I think. Wes Thornton asks, why are kids so sensitive today? When bullied, life went on when I was a child in the 80s. First of all, is that the general sentiment of society at large, those who are parents and those who aren't parents, that bullying isn't a problem? And if bullying is a problem, doesn't that need to be changed to affect some kind of change in society?
A lot of words. The part that I heard that I really want to speak to is this whole notion that somehow bullying is worse today or whatever you mentioned, something along that. The reality is nobody deserves to be called a name 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 175 years ago, or today. That's the core issue. And the other part to it is if we have any doubt, all we got to do is turn on cable news network every night and watch bullying personified over and over and over again from the left, from the right, from every political perspective. The way we treat each other in this, not only in school, but in culture, is the core to addressing the fundamental issue about bullying and the way we treat each other with dignity. And I would just offer the word civility, because there's an absence of some of that in culture. And that's the core foundation, again, to foster the development of empathy and our care for others. Because until we address that issue, we're going to have a tough time norming a school to stop bullying.
And that's a good point. When I was growing up, the exposure to bullying I had on TV was Opie getting pushed around on the Andy Griffith Show. Now, as you say, turn on many news commentators and it's pretty severe. We're going now to Cindy in the audience.
David, I'm here with Nisha Harris, and she has a question for you, because I think you had talked about some people, and the Longs mentioned this, having learning disabilities, some of the kids being targets, and that being a real common thing, but yours was regarding something else.
Yes, I have a son who has severe food allergies, and while that isn't a learning disability, it does make him look a little different. So a child might pick at him by tainting his food, by touching his food or taking it. We have had a few instances, but luckily we are at a school where things are handled very well. I wanted to ask, I'm a PTA secretary of S.T.A.R.S. Does parental involvement help the situation? Because I find that going to the school and speaking about my son's disability and just being there, seeing the children, getting to know them, I'm showing them who I am, that I'm there for them as well. And so I was wondering, does that help?
So does being a familiar face help?
Yes.
Karen?
Absolutely. I think it's really important for parents to have a relationship with their teachers and with the school personnel, so that you were able to articulate that there was a concern that you had and they handled it respectfully. They know you and they've gotten to know you and you can interact with them regularly. So I think that parental involvement is crucial to understanding what's happening to not only your child, but when a child has been subjected to bullying behavior, the parents are involved in that and understand the ramifications for the child that has been targeted by that. So parental involvement is absolutely crucial.
With all these experts here and around the country trying to come up with solutions for the bullying problem in our schools, maybe in some cases the answer lies with the kids themselves. Here's Cindy to introduce you to a remarkable second grader in Cleveland, showing everybody how to fight the bullies.
People getting bullied at this school, and by being a member of the club, you can't bully anyone at Taylor Elementary or anywhere else.
The cool students at Taylor Elementary School all belong to the same club, ABC, the Anti-Bullying Club. Second grader John McCracken started the club. He decided bullying can best be stopped by students themselves. He came up with wristbands and made the rules. You don't say bad things about others. You don't make fun of what they're wearing or what they look like. You don't tell lies about them, and you treat them with respect and love.
Those are the ideals that as a society we uphold and we promote, and it's just really inspiring, and it's really great to see that this came from the mind of a second grader.
School officials hope by empowering these students to be in their own club, they're sending a message: bullying stops here.
And Oran suggested a while ago, Rodger, more guidance counselors. And I was surprised by that answer, because I thought you would have said, let's put cameras in every room, or let's have 5 school resource officers instead of 1. He says guidance counselors.
And I think that's a great suggestion, because without kids to be able to talk to someone, it's a lost cause. But it's not just school counselors, it's also the classroom teacher, because those class conversations that occur between kids at that lowest common denominator, that's where things really change. Elementary, middle, and high school is that relationship that's already been mentioned tonight between the staff member and that group of kids they work with. It's not just about more counselors, it's about those relationships that already are present in the building between student and teacher.
You like this John McCracken kid with his anti-bullying club?
Kid.
Second grade.
I'm telling you, we need to sign him up.
I'm with you.
He's amazing.
All right, let's go back to the audience and Cindy.
We need him to be an ambassador, don't we? Yes, he's wonderful. Chris Grooms, bullying is very much on your mind. He is director of Grundy County's Safe Schools program. And Chris, you have a question for the Longs.
Yes, I am a brand new OAS bullying instructor. I studied with Mr. Dinwiddie there this year. And a lot of things that I'll be training our teachers and stuff on, is there something that you can tell me that I need to really emphasize that probably wasn't emphasized in your case, that you wished was?
Listen to that person. Make sure that they know they're heard and it's not downplayed. Make sure that they know that it will be taken care of, and make sure that they know that there'll be follow-up. And then you've done all that you can do. Those 3 things will take care of that situation. It's just so important that they know that there's somebody that they can go to that they trust.
Let's talk about solutions. We only have a few minutes left, and we've talked about problems, and we've talked about listening and following up and that sort of thing. But there are resources available. We've talked about some online resources, and we've talked about the movie Bully, frankly, I think is a huge resource and a step in the right direction. Rodger, let me start with you. We're looking for something. We have children in schools, we're a teacher in schools, we're looking for resources. Where do we look?
Well, I think, as we've talked about several times, in the state of Tennessee for sure, looking at the Department of Education's website on their school safety site, that link is an incredibly important resource for not only educators but also parents. I think the other thing too is there are some basic things that can be found at stopbullying.gov, the government's free site, that really has some tremendous resources as well for schools and parents and children that really want tools to help address that issue. And then it's already been mentioned about another great resource is the Anti-Defamation League, which has some tremendous resources on their website as well for schools, and practically in the research guide, the resource guide that goes along with the movie Bully is an excellent resource as well. So there's some great resources there.
Let's go back to the audience and Cindy.
Thanks, David. You were talking about the internet and websites. Tracy Fitch Newman is a mom of a 15-year-old in Sequatchie County. You came up with what you perceived as a solution. Tell us what you did.
I started a Stop Bullying page in Sequatchie County schools, and I can't get a lot of kids on there. I think they're afraid to come forward. I can't get a lot of teachers to join it. I'm afraid they're afraid of their jobs.
Is what she's doing, is that a good idea, Rodger, of doing a Facebook or a website page to get people signed on?
Well, I know we've got several as well, and I know there's often resistance from staff members to be engaged with young people on the same site because of some real sticky, there's some slippery slope lines in terms of ethics and professional ethics with staff members being on the same page as kids. And I know that we are facing some issues in Tennessee around that right now with some of the tragedies that have occurred in the state related to staff and kids being connected on Facebook pages. So that's probably some of the resistance that you find.
A new school year will start soon. Rodger, recommendations? I mean, do we need to have a full student body meeting on day one? Do we need to have as many parents come in on open house night on day one and read the Riot Act? What do you do to start a new school year?
I would never have a big event for everybody until the staff is trained about what to do, because inviting big events with no staff training is potentially litigious in our culture, because if we give kids false hope, back to what you guys have talked about, that something's going to change, and if nothing changes, nothing changes. And the core issue in change will come because the adults set the parameter in the culture to change what exists for kids in the building. So one thing is do a survey. Make sure you got some data, and make sure staff are trained, and make sure that the adults in the building are increasing their supervision in those hot spots in the building where nobody's around. So be vigilant and those kind of things.
I'd like to ask our audience, if you will, to give all our panelists a nice round of applause for their hard work this evening. Really appreciate you all. And our thanks to our partners at the Times Free Press and WTCI, Channel 45, your public television station, for hosting this event for us tonight in their beautiful studio in Chattanooga. So again, thanks for joining us. We hope this has been beneficial for you, and we encourage you to keep up the bully battle. Maybe someday we'll score a victory. Thanks for watching.